now we've put all those seeds into the seed trays. So we've seeded the trays. Now we need to germinate all those seeds. We could lay them out on benches in greenhouses, which we've done in the past, but then to get a good germination, you want to keep that greenhouse quite warm, because a nice warm area will get those seeds to germinate quickly. You also want to maintain a high humidity, because if those seeds start to swell and germinate and then you forget to water them and they dry out, they're going to die pretty quickly. So you want to maintain a high temperature and a high humidity for best germination. And in the winter, high heated greenhouse space is rather expensive. So what do we use? We use a germination chamber, which you see here. And it's a very simple cabinet. You can see it's a stainless steel frame with plexiglass walls and some shelves inside. And outside of it, you see a tank of water. So that tank of water has a little tube coming out the bottom. The tube leads inside, and underneath, you can't really see it too easily, is a pan of water with a small electric heater. And there's a thermostat inside this chamber, which I usually set around 75 or 78 degrees. So when it cools off, it triggers the electric heater to turn on, and when the electric heater turns on, it warms up that water, and as the water warms up, it creates humidity. And that's why inside this cabinet, you can see water droplets, because it's a very high humidity in here. That's so that we don't lose our humidity and get a very good germination. So now we have a high humidity of 95 to 100% humidity, and a temperature usually of somewhere between 75 and 80 degrees, depending on the seeds that we're growing. Now, you can imagine with I think there's 10 or 12 shelves in here, if we were to lay all those out onto one layer on a greenhouse bench, that's a lot of greenhouse space. In a shelved cabinet here, where you don't really need sun until they've germinated, we can have a lot more trays in a small footprint rather than in the greenhouse. So here you can see we have a tray of Swiss chard, which will be transplanted out in the field at some point in April. And you can see the seeds are just now germinating. This probably should have come out of the germination chamber yesterday, because once they germinate, you want to get them in the greenhouse, on the bench, in the sun, because if you don't, they're going to get very long and stringy. So we have to come here sometimes twice a day to check and see if any trays have germinated, pull them out, and put them on the greenhouse bench. Depending on the type of seed, it can take anywhere from I would say 4 to 14 days to germinate. If they were in a greenhouse that was minimally heated, that went down to say 32 degrees a night, it could take 2 to 3 weeks for those seeds to germinate, depending on the sun. Here in this nice warm cabinet, like I said, 4 to 14 days, and they're up and going. And then we take that tray out, put it on the greenhouse bench, and then we have space for another tray. So we're constantly seeding, and this cabinet has enough space for 100 seed trays. With 100 seed trays every week, you can imagine we can go through a lot of seed trays, and then suddenly the greenhouses will start to fill up quite a bit once we get into late March and April. But then at some point in April, all those plants then move out into the field. So it's this constant rotation from seeding on the seeder to the germination chamber to the greenhouse benches. Possibly then we might upsize it to a larger pot, and then eventually out into the field. Again, utilizing the space as efficiently as possible, cutting the energy cost to do so, and then getting a beautiful crop out of the field. So in this greenhouse, we maintain a much higher temperature at night. Here we'll try to maintain a good 60 degrees in the evening. And because certain crops require that higher temperature. Now lettuce doesn't need such a high temperature, but we have the space, so we threw some lettuce in between these tomato plants just to utilize that space. The lettuce will be harvested in the next 10 days, going in the CSA share. And then after that, these tomato plants will just continue to grow up nice and tall. We can lengthen the string as they get taller. But the tomatoes need that higher temperature. It's a higher temperature, more tropical type crop. And if you let it go below 50 degrees, you actually start losing the blossoms. So this is a higher heated greenhouse. You can see we have tomatoes above, tomatoes below. We'll also grow cucumbers in environments like this, as well as peppers.